Obviously, I think as IMGs, we do not get exposed to interviews as much. The truth is, our applications, our packages can look great, but if you cannot sell yourself, if you cannot communicate well, as you would imagine, it's hard for a program director to really want you or think as if you communicate well with the patients, with the colleagues, with everyone in general, right? So making sure you come across as someone who can communicate well is important, who can put across their point well is important. I would say within the first couple minutes, most people have an idea if you are someone who will probably make it. The other important thing is a lot of times a lot of people are like, oh, how do I mention this specific point that was not mentioned in my CV or PS? And when we did that session last time, I had a lot of questions like, how do I address this? I think your interview is also a very safe space where you can redirect your interview based on whatever you feel comfortable is your strong suit. For example, you have an achievement that you haven't talked much about, or you feel like this is a big thing that you've done. You can very gently sway your interview in that direction that, oh, and it can even be as obvious as towards the end of the interview, you can mention like, oh, there is one thing that I did want to mention. I used to have like my newsletter that I was the editor of. I just used to have it with me. And if you feel that comfort level with your interviewer, you can pretty much just like, oh, I wanted to show you this. And for the most part, people appreciate that because you have about 10-15 minutes with everyone and you have to make it count. It might feel like, oh, am I just saying too much? But this is your chance to say too much, right? In a very beautifully polite way. But that is why you're interviewing with people. They really, really want to know you well. Feel good. Your positivity is very infectious. Even if it's 3 a.m., 4 a.m., wake up early, make sure everything's set up. Never a bad idea to check up that things are all working well. Fourth thing, again, which is similar to how I always say, never compare yourself to other people. Think about where you are. Think about how you feel about your interviewing skills. And like Nisha said, I mostly interviewed for neuro spots, except like a couple prelim internal medicine spots. Honestly, I was stressed about those more than anything because I was like, I know neuro it is, so that was easy. Just being yourself is easier. Definitely prepare the basic questions that are probably expected of you, and we can talk more about it, how Nisha addressed those, how I addressed those, and then if you have more questions. But a few of these questions include, okay, tell me about yourself and things that you're planning to say. Just have them in your mind. You can ask us those questions. What are your future plans, say about in 10 years? Why do you want to do medicine? What is, I think a common question I was asked at least was, what was different about your internship or your med school back from where you did it? Because if someone's getting you into their system, it's actually a potential selling point that you can talk about. Like I have done this and I can bring this to the system, as well as nullifying their belief like you might not fit well into this system, right? Those are five general tips before we address the specifics. But I'm gonna pass it on to Nisha before addressing any questions.
Yeah, I think no, that was a solid list. I think just a few other things to also add on to what Avi said. Now that, applications are in, you guys did the first step, which is the hardest. You did the USMLEs, all of that. A lot of getting interviews is out of your control. Like everything that you did that was in your control, you did. Now, you're kind of just waiting. But something that I think is undersold on, it's okay to ask for an interview. That's something that, depending on if you're at a site and you can physically go up into the program director's office or wherever and just say, hey, I'd like to interview here. And the worst thing they'll say is like, sorry, your spots are full. But there's no harm in asking or ask over email. Just say, I really like this program. I want to be in Boston. I want to be in New York. I would like to interview here. And there's absolutely no harm, nothing, you're going to lose out on by asking. And other pitfalls I think I see a lot is not knowing what's on your application. If there's something on your application that you put in, make sure you know it very, very well, whether it's a research paper, whether it's like something you put in as a hobby or an interest. Definitely, don't lie and say you know languages that you don't. One of my friends ended up getting an interview for a program in Puerto Rico, and the interview was in Spanish. She said she knew Spanish, but she didn't. So don't oversell yourself. Like, of course, definitely don't undersell yourself, but also be genuine. And especially even if you were a second author, third author on a poster or a paper, there's always a chance they might ask about it. So make sure you know it very well. The findings, or what was the conclusion, what was your takeaway from it. And something that people I think are looking for are just, like Avi mentioned, friendly people that are easy to teach. You don't have to know everything about medicine. You don't have to know everything about psychiatry or neurology before you start. That's not the expectation. No one really, in my experience, asked technical questions. There was maybe one program that asked, like, what would you do if you had a patient with in congestive heart failure? Like, what are the next steps you would do? But most times, like, no one's asking any sort of technical stuff. They just want to know if you're a friendly person that they can work with, if you're a friendly person that they can
What did
teach.
I come?
Sorry?
I think there was just a background glitch.
Ah, okay. Yeah, so just come across as someone like if you're on call at 3 a.m., would I want to hang out with this person or is this person just gonna bore me to death? Just, be a friendly face. And when they do ask about like, do you have any questions for me? Try and ask genuine questions. Definitely don't ask them anything that you can find on their website because that makes it seem like you didn't look at their website at all. So on that note, also look through their website, know unique things about each program. I think a lot of times, especially with IM, for example, they'll be like, okay, what kind of fellowships are offered at your program? What kind of procedures? Like things that you can find through the website, try and avoid asking. And I think another thing that programs want to see is that you're someone that can handle stress. Residency is stressful, no matter what specialty. They want to make sure that you're not going to quit in the middle because that's just going to be a disadvantage to them. They have to end up filling the spot. They have like the call burden increases for everyone else. So they want to make sure when things get really bad and really tough, you can handle it. You're not going to complain. You're not going to so whatever examples you can find for example, like being an international student, that's a pretty challenging situation. So use that to your advantage. Like say that things like I've moved around a lot. I've had to get used to new places. I've had to adapt and make friends. And it's something that I'm used to and I'm comfortable doing. So use things like that as your strength. And whatever your unique interest is, it's okay to talk about it. You don't have to say I love doing research if you don't. Um, a lot like for example I really liked leadership or traveling and that's something that I spent a lot of time talking about in my interview so whatever your interest is um just be passionate about it and talk about it.
Agreed. I think those are all great points. On that thing, that one thing I got reminded of, especially with the situation currently, the uh, the air is always a little different every year around. Something's going on, something's brewing. Um, I think we might just have to meet. Um, okay, found the mute all. Perfect. So it feels like why my year? Why are things happening this way this time around? Trust me, something's going on every year. During my year, it was COVID. Visa appointments were super high, or electives were so hard to find. And I'm sure things are happening right now. Uh, just divide into buckets, things that you can control and things that you can't, and then don't worry about things that you can't. You do your best. Same thing, a lot of people might have questions about, oh, what visas might be offered, H1, J1. Again, right now it's questionable what do you really want as well, regardless. Uh, when you are doing your interviews, I would personally focus on coming across as a really good candidate, being yourself. I'm very, very sure, and it's reasonable to ask about visas once you are prepared that you have been liked and you have asked all the relevant questions. Why do you want to make to a residency program? And then later, towards the end, if you're considering to rank programs accordingly, it's fine to maybe shoot an email to the program coordinator, but I would not necessarily bring it up right away. Just because that is not what is being decided in that moment. The interview is not to help you decide. will you get an H1 or a J1 necessarily. It is more so if we want you in the program and if you like the program as well, right? Um, so just being mindful of those things. It's very reasonable to ask things that will matter to you, but also seeing the essence of what time it is, and why you're in there. Like Nisha said, I think asking questions that genuinely will affect your choice of the program is important. A few of my questions included, like, I loved medical education. I wanted to grow really, really a lot in it. So my questions were, oh, I see there's a medical education track in your program. Can you tell me a little more about it? Or how does that work? So I think those kinds of questions are perfect because that kind of also tells on Nisha's point that, oh, you have researched the program, that you know that this track exists. And then you are actually also asking something that might matter, right? And then maybe research is your interest. So talking about what kind of research opportunities do you have, or if your interest is a specific association with a specific thing that a program does, or you really want to know more about the city, because that's going to be important for you to being able to commute, right? But yeah, staying fresh in your head with all of those questions is important. One important thing that I have realized as part of being on the residents panel for pre-interviews over the last 2 years, I love when we try make it casual. What we want you guys to do is feel yourself very comfortable. Having said that, you still want to remember you are the applicant. You want to still be mindful of the content and expression of things that you're seeing. There's all sorts of people with all sorts of takeaways based on a very short 10-minute meeting. Um, it's very easy to sometimes slip and become very casual. At the end of the day, it's still an interview. There's a reason you're dressing a certain way, right? So maintain that kind of, know the kinds of things that you're gonna mention when you're saying your interests, know the kind of things that you're mentioning when you're saying things that don't necessarily in your head you feel that are very formal, but they still cannot go beyond like a certain level. Like, you don't want to give any reason that anyone red flags you for whatsoever reason. Everyone's trying to pick up on things, right? It's a 10-minute thing. Everyone's trying to find a reason to green flag or red flag you. Because when we discuss amongst ourselves, we're thinking like, why are we giving a 5 out of 5 to a resident, and why are we giving a 3 out of 5 to a resident, right? For an applicant. So if someone's coming across great, lovely, we'll give them a 4. But if you give us something, or we've worked with you here and we've liked you, that's when you get a 5. But if you mess up, you'll get a 3. Not that it matters. It's not like that's everything, but I'm just giving you perspective on what kind of happens at our ends sometime. We're trying to just base it off something, right? And if you're someone who's just sitting through the interview, not doing, saying anything, that disinterest also sometimes come across as a red flag sometimes, because it's again a projection of how you would be as a person, right? I get it, you could be an introvert in life and you're allowed to be that, but you're also expected to show interest towards something that you're applying towards, right? um those are a few thoughts that I had. Additionally, anything else, Nisha?
No, I think that's a good place to start. Like we said, we're happy to answer any specific questions. You guys can type them. You guys can just speak up, whatever.
Perfect. All right, Devika, I'm just gonna put you on the spotlight and have you share your thoughts or questions.
Okay, so I have been preparing or trying to start preparing for the interview, and I guess I'm finding myself lost in um the tell me about yourself. I mean, I know that it's personal to each person, but what are some basic areas that I should be covering that a program director would want to know? That's one of my questions. And then the other is, what is it that each, so there are going to be multiple different interviews. One would be with the PD, with other faculty, with residents. What is it that each of them are trying to gauge, just as a general factor? So I know to make sure that I address those qualities or points in my answers and don't miss them.
Sure.
Please.
I can. So the second question, I think that's definitely a tricky thing for sure. When you have, 5 or 6 interviews, how do I come up? I think for me, that was definitely stressful trying to think of 6 different, like, smart sounding questions for every different person. That was hard. And I think it's really different for each program. There's some programs that will come in that have no structure. They're each just gonna like have a 15-minute casual conversation with you without any, and it might sound very repetitive to you. And there are some programs that have it organized a lot better, and they'll set aside different objectives for each of the different interviews ahead of time. So, for example, at Rutgers last year, as a resident who was interviewing, we were given specific questions to ask. Like out of 10 questions, we could ask certain, and that was more like our theme was how do they handle like obstacles? What are some situations that they were in where they had a disagreement with people, and how they address that? And then the program directors had their own theme related questions. So each person may get a theme. So it really depends on where you're interviewing. They might have a little bit different structure. But yeah, there is going to be overlap sometimes, and you can try as best to make it sound different, but things like tell me about yourself aren't going to sound different. That's okay. Um, and what was the first question that you asked?
What's the main headings or cap points that you should cover under Tell Me About Yourself that
Yeah,
you
I think
should
it's
definitely
something.
not miss? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. I would try not to keep it too long, but also not too brief. So maybe around like somewhere between 2 minutes. One, I would just tell them about my education, where I did my education. And I like talking about it because that was something that I was considering a strength in my application. I would tell them like I went to med school in England and the Caribbean. It just because to people it's interesting. But if you feel like that's not something that you really are is like something that stands out in your application, you can skip it. Whatever you think is going to be something that you can continue conversation off of. For example, if you can say, "Oh, both my parents are physicians," if it's something that you think, is going to be interesting to talk about, and this is a reason why I'm going into the specialty. So try and cater it around what is bringing you to the table right then and there. Um, and I would spend a little bit of time telling people what I want to do with residency or after, like very brief, like I'm looking to be a psychiatrist, and then after this is what I'm interested in specifically. What else? And then I would just say a little bit about my hobbies, because everything else is already on the application. They can see, all the other like theoretical stuff. So I think just something that sounds fun.
Yeah, I agree pretty much with everything. It's something, as you can see, like everyone's interview styles is very different, both from the end of the interviewer and from your end as a person. And that's fine. That is fine. No one's expecting necessarily like a very predefined kind of an interview. Important thing you will realize how I figured out during my year is three broad categories of people in terms of how they like to interview. And I tried to make a compilation over my YouTube that I think I've shared the link to as well. But that's basically three different kinds of interviews that I came across my about 80 to 100 different people that we interviewed across different programs last year. There's this friendly interviewer who's pretty much like how we are with you. Honestly, the conversation's gonna flow pretty smooth. They're gonna make you feel very comfortable. You might feel like they're your elder brother vibes, and it's very easy to like start feeling like, oh, great, and just talking everything, which is great, which is what they're expecting. Just be very mindful of not saying a few things that you don't want to say. But otherwise, it's great. You can tell about yourself. You can also ask them questions more comfortably, right? And I had one of these people who was so nice, who was like, who pretty much in the interview would tell me like, listen, I love your PS. I love your CV. It's been great talking to you. You tell me, I would love to vouch for you to our program director. So this is something that can happen within the interview itself. What we're trying to give you is gauge you a sense of the whole spectrum of interviewers that at least we have seen, right? Um, the other kind of an interviewer that I came across was a very old school one. Like, I was pretty confident about everything that I've done. Regardless, there will be people who are very old school who are looking at their sheet of paper and not necessarily making eye contact, not because they don't like you, because that is how they kind of operate. And it can feel intimidating. It can be perceived as like, am I doing something wrong? Why is this not going as well as my other interviews have gone? What is wrong with me, right? Don't let that throw you off. uh be that is important. Like, you cannot let the perception of yourself not doing great make your interview worse, or let you come across as less interesting or scared. You do your thing. You at least have your basic things that you want to talk about. And if you feel at some point the interview is not going as well, that's why you have your backup things that, oh, I also wanted to tell you about this one thing that I've really done. And that's absolutely fine. The third, and most commonly, you'll find these balanced interviewers. Most program directors are like that because they are in a very formal position that I believe demands a formal interaction where, yes, they're available to you to ask any questions, but and they're mostly very charming people. And then you were also kind of rightfully very appropriately scared and cautious about what you're going to say because they're the program director, and that is absolutely fair. But but they will ask you sometimes questions on the lines of, oh, tell me a little about yourself, is mostly I think what it starts with, which is an open ground for you to lead your application. uh, a- you'll have some people amongst your bunch of five people who will ask you somewhat more typical questions. Very rarely, like Nisha said, could those be academic related. I think it does come down to what specialty are you a part of. My understanding is if you're medicine, you might be asked, like, at least it's reasonable to expect like basic medicine questions like, okay, what would you do in a situation like where your person coded right away? I'm hoping not. That's not necessarily why the interviews are, but I guess it is very reasonable to be prepared. What would you answer in those cases? Because just imagine you messing up a medical question where you're expected to be a medicine resident at your stage. You don't want to do that, right? So just very basic stuff. Uh, Pulmonary edema, or like at least medical emergencies, STEMIs, or tension pneumothorax, things that you've done. Just if you feel that you don't know the correct answers for whatsoever reason, just brush over them, just in case. Uh, but I think another category of questions that I got asked were behavioral questions sometimes every once in a while. Uh, and these questions could be like, oh, how do you think you would respond to criticism? Or how do you think you respond to criticism in general? So these are those nuanced questions where, you might not be prepared and you might just be taken aback if you've never thought about these questions. But even if you've given it one thought, at least you can feel more confident about whatever you're answering, right? So just having a good sense of how you are. Another example of a behavioral question could be, hey, if your senior in the same team interrupts you in front of a patient, how do you handle that situation? Right? So these are those para clinical questions. And these are questions that, like, if I'm a program who's getting a lot of applicants, I'm in that place to choose my applicant. So I can base my decision on these questions. If this is a program which kind of has a lot of seats and just basically has a very basic requirement of you coming across as who can communicate, you probably might not be asked these questions, right? So I think of your interviews like as one big filter. Filter one is like, okay, no big red flags. That I think is how a lot of people perceive. Don't give any red flags. Then there is like, have you impressed the person on top of it? Right? So a lot of people, if they have enough seats and are looking for great applications, which you probably have, you're gonna make it to that filter and to a lot of programs. If your target is a place which is hard to get, has minimal seats, then you want to like cross the second barrier as well, which definitely requires more prep. Um, I think definitely brush up on what you want to talk about, your hobbies and interests. A lot of your interview goes on that because that's the fun part.
And they'll
People,
ask details too. Like if you put reading, people will ask what's the current book you're reading. And if you, don't have an answer, they're gonna be like, well, you put this on your CV. Um, yeah, so be prepared to answer things like that if you put like reading or watching movies, like getting specific questions related.
eh, exactly. I think I did say this on my PSCV session as well. I had put graphic designing on my interests and hobbies, and there was this interviewer who was, oh, can you show me some of those? And I pretty much had like I had it pulled it up on my Google Photos because I by chance had it. But that kind of like was in that moment, oh, you could potentially ask that. And it's a reasonable question, right? If you've put it on your PS or CV, then I guess you are interested in it enough that you should have something. And I think it's also fair to think on the lines that if you've done something but you feel you cannot talk about it, I would not even go in that direction, right? Because you don't want to be perceived as you have lied or not thought about. The best case scenario is people can be like, okay, you are telling the truth, but you're not well prepared, which is also a red flag. The worst case scenario is, oh, this person's just lying, right? So think about what you're putting in your PSCV, which is now done, and talking about in your interviews, right? Um, Same thing about research. Now, if you have something that you've sent in your PS or CV that is research, and if there's this research heavy person, he will probably talk about it. Like, oh, you did this XYZ research. Tell me a little about it, right? So think about practicing those questions like that as well. Um,
Yeah, I think one of the questions in the chat box here is what are the possible research related questions? I think like you said, tell me about it is definitely, the most common one. I would say I've been asked, just like what was the conclusion, or how can you like apply these findings to your like to practice, or do you have other research projects that you're working on that just so they can also kind of assess, like, is this institution going to be able to support you if you're really passionate about research, in a specific area like ADHD? And then they'll, tell you like, oh, we have a great ADHD program here, or, whatever that your interest is in. Trying to think of other possible research related questions. Anything else that you've come across, Abby?
Yeah, I think research related wise, I've never felt that they've delved too deep into mine, but I think that is also because like I would redirect to things that I was more interested in. But if there were things that I've mentioned, like this is the research that I've done, be definitely prepared to talk about it. Like, what was your role in there? What did you learn? What was your conclusion? Those kinds of things are like basic expectation. Like it's not a valid answer. I did it a long time back. That's not a valid answer. Is the other thing. You don't want to give that impression for sure. Um, Hi Hetvi. Any specific questions that we can help answer? Good to see you.
Oh, hi. Thank you for this session. It has been very, very informative so far. I do have a couple of questions actually. So, when you were saying that we need to be aware that there are no red flags, what are some evident red flags which we should be avoiding?
I think we both can talk about what I personally feel is one, just not being like prepared and coming across the first impression is a big red or green flag decider a lot of times. Is like if how effectively are you being able to communicate in English, because our interviews are going to be in English, right? How well are you able to project your personality, or not giving answers that are clearly not the right answer are red flags. For example, like I'm sure most people are prepared, but if you say things like that don't go in the direction of, oh, this person would not necessarily be a good team player. Like you don't want to give answers like you are very well equipped in the sense to run solo shows. No one runs solo shows anymore. It's all team-based practice. Uh, Always think of yourself and put in a position these might be cliche answers or on the lines of cliche answers. Like, I would love to, and I'm very confident in my clinical opinion, but I also feel that I'm always learning. So I definitely don't feel hesitant in addressing the questions to the patients, but I will always come back for more information. And I like kind of put it across like you're a team player. I or like I've had experience where I have colleagues and we're always talking about how to improve our patient care and things like that amongst ourselves. So you want to project that you're a team player, you work really well with teams. I would say in your interviews, mention things where you have worked with teams, worked with people across different ethnicities. If you have, you're coming to the US, land of like diversity. So you really want to like use that to your advantage. Sometimes people will ask you questions like, you'll come to the US. What kind of challenges do you think you'll be facing? How I would, for example, address that question, like that's very true. That is something that I've given a thought, and I was very excited when I was coming to the US in the first place. But when I came for my electives, I felt like a natural fit, or like I felt like uh, the fact that I already have worked with the diverse population actually worked in my advantage when I came to the US. Or because, for example, I'd be like, because I know 4 languages or 3 languages, I realized that was such an asset to have in the US. So you've kind of tricked the interview from being in a place where they were seeing like you potentially might be at a disadvantage. You've kind of swayed or tilted it in a direction like, oh, taking you might be actually advantageous for a program. And everyone needs to do that. Even if you are a US IMG, based on whatever your situation is, you tilt it in a direction where it's more appropriate or more advantageous for the program to have you. It's someone can sympathize with you for things that have happened to you, but no one's gonna take you in their program for sympathy, right? You really need to fit well for those 5 seats, 10 seats, even 50 seats, but no seats there for you to just grab it if you're not a person who makes it to the program just right. Um,
I think
yeah.
that actually also leads into Mustafa's question about going unmatched and then answering questions related to it. I would say definitely speak about what you've done to change your application in the year, whether it's more electives or whether it's a research project, what you spent that extra time doing, and how your application looks different, how you're a like a more suited candidate this year. So put a lot of emphasis on that, I would say. Abby, any other thoughts related to that?
Yeah, I think that is at least something that for people who have gone unmatched that needs to be addressed in
Mm.
your heads at least very, very strongly. I would even say if you don't specifically get asked that question, everyone's aware that
Mhm.
you've gone unmatched. Definitely uh don't avoid that question. Come across very upfront, and then maybe even mention like, I actually last year I did this and I realized like, and I worked so much in this direction, I worked over research and I did this XYZ. Mention it so that when they're hearing like, they're thinking of you as a new applicant altogether, like, oh, this person did so much and XYZ,
Mhm.
instead of like just going around. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say it's similar to also the weakness question. I try and answer it in a similar way when someone asks, like, what do you feel like is your weakness? Say what your weakness is, but also say what you're doing to improve that weakness and how you're trying to get better at it. Because then it shows that, you're aware of it and you're actually trying to change it. Um, so
Yeah.
that there's a bunch of questions listed on here as well. Why are you choosing US for your residency?
Can we have these people turn on their videos and ask these questions? 'Cause I think it's just more useful. Oh, sure, you can call them out, whoever you're reading.
I
Um,
think it's K. But I mean, it's a good question. I don't know, Abby, you have an answer for that? To be honest, I haven't been asked that.
Uh, I think in indirect ways I have been asked those questions, and I think they're very genuine questions that we should have had thought about. So I kind of have addressed those in my interviews in some ways or form. Why are you choosing US for your residency? I think for me, I can tell you like how I used to think about it was, for example, I want to go into neurology. So how neurology operates in the US is very different from how it operates in India, and you need to be very careful. You do not want to like say one place is better than the other in a way that's disrespectful to the other place, because no one's going to change the fact that you did your residency from where you did it. So if you say not great things about it, those are not great things about you, right? So you were like, it was a great experience, and now this my future aspirations are more in line with where I'm going. For example, neurology doesn't exist the way it does here. It's very research led. Honestly, how I feel about it is, if I'm a great neurologist, if I'm learning from the best place that I can, I'm serving everyone better. And I genuinely believe that, right? Or example, it's also sometimes like, it's not necessarily just the US, it's also the programs that I'm specifically applying for, right? You can put it in that context as well. Like how there's a great combination of education and research and being a clinician here. I think that balance fits perfectly with my goals in the future. I think on those lines, sometimes you might be asked, like, what are your plans in the future? Do you plan to go back? Do you plan to stay? Those are also very reasonably expected questions. Have a good answer in mind, whatever your answer is. My answer for where do I see myself in 10 years was, I know that I want to be in a place where I'm a practicing clinician for the rest of my life, as long as I can see happily. Also have some med ed stuff. I used to mention medically mediocre because that honestly is something that I am very, very happily passionate about. And it's okay to not have a very concrete plan. I was like, it's been 5 years that I started medically mediocre. I've come across a few people who are also passionate to give back. So in the next 10, 15 years, I'm hoping as I practice to become a really good clinician, I would love to come across people with similar mindsets and hopefully make it into a collaborative approach in the background, which also helps people along the way. So it's fine that you've thought about it, but it's not a concrete plan. It's not like, oh, by year 3, I plan to do this. By year 5, I plan to do this. Because at the end of the day, you're coming into residency, which is going to be busy, right? So that's why you also don't want to give across that vibe that you're too busy in the next 5 years, where you have too many interests that it's gonna like mess up with your residency itself. You want to project availability, you want to project interest, like Nisha mentioned initially, you want to project that you can handle stress. Those are things like, think like a program director. Why would you want someone in your program, right? On the same lines, if you've given your step 3, that's why I'm very comfortable having you, because I don't care like you'll flunk your exam, right? If you have, honestly, if you have given your step 3 in the interim or during your interviews, or you're planning to, I would say somehow mention that. Remind everyone that you've given your step 3. I think it comes across as big. Because as a program director, everything is great, but you not flunking your step 3 is also big. You not quitting residency in the middle is also really big. Those are like prerequisites for me before I start liking you as a person, right? Um, yeah, Nisha.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's like definitely, your academics are there. Everyone knows you're smart. Everyone knows, you're a doctor. You've done what you need to do. But now it's also like a lot about it. A lot of the application now is also who you are as a person. And it's okay to say that you're choosing a certain place for human reasons. And I think, at the end of the day, we're all people. I mean, obviously, I'm a psychiatrist, so we care about who people are. It's okay to say, I want to be close to my family. I want to be, I love the mountains and I want to, because like we're not robots. These are 4 years of your life, probably in your 20s, in your 30s, whatever, it's their prime years and people know that. Or, I'm sure it's specialty dependent. But I think a lot of programs do care about that. And even your future goals, like it's okay to talk about things that are not academic too. If you're like, I want to be in a place that has good schools for my kids, if that's something that you're looking for, or asking questions like, people do want to care that you have a life outside, because that also shows how much support systems you have. So I just want to stress that it's okay to talk about those things too and ask about those things.
100%. And just to build on that point too, like for example, if you have family in a specific city, um, also use this place to remind them like, oh, I am Emory actually worked great because it's a great program, but additionally, I also have family here. So I think that makes all the difference in the world. So now as a program director or someone, I'm also hearing that high chance that you're gonna rank us high, kind of a thing. High chance you're feeling homesick, you have family here, you're not going to go back to India, or things like that. Subconsciously you have a support system here, right? Those are very subconscious things that kind of can give a concrete support to what you're saying, instead of you just coming across as like, oh, you're saying all the good things that you could likely say to every program. But if you tell I have family in Atlanta, I'm hoping you're not telling every city in the US that you have family everywhere, right? Cool. I think Japji has a question.
I do, yes. Uh, Hi, how are you?
Beautiful.
So
Japji,
thank you so much, first of all, for doing this. This is super helpful. My name is Jabji. I'm applying for psychiatry and solely for psychiatry. So this is extra special for me. Um, my question was more so for this part of the interview season, and I wanted your perspective on letters of interest. So specific questions being, um, what's the best time to send them out? Should I follow up on my letter of interest? When should I do that? And the most pressing one, personally for me, is, do you send letters of interest for programs that you really like, but those that don't fall within your signaled program? So beyond the 10 programs that you've signaled. Maybe they fall within your geographical preferences, but you've not signaled these programs. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much again for doing this.
Yeah. Firstly, psychiatry is the best
It,
specialty. So 100% support
objectively,
that.
objectively.
In terms of signaling, so we didn't have signals as embedded when I applied. But I think it's okay to send letters of interest. And in terms of timeline, I would say do it as soon as you can. It's never too early. Like even first week of applications, like do it as soon as possible. And I think it's okay. Like I think I sent out maybe 25 letters of interest, just to all the program. I knew I wanted to be in New York, New Jersey area. So I sent out to most programs around there, and I tried to customize it a little bit just because there was so much volume and it's also hard. I definitely told them I want to be in that area because my family's close to there. I was doing rotations. I loved being in the city. And I would also try and like look through their website to see what about their program specifically I liked. For example, if the program director was working on some sort of research, or they held a position in an organization like the American Psychiatry Association or something, and I would say I want to work with those specific faculties and be in a program where they're involved in communities and organizations like that. So and in terms of following up on them, if they haven't replied, I would maybe the most I would do is try and forward it to the program coordinators, because sometimes the program directors are too busy to look at things. But if I haven't heard back, I wouldn't email the program director again. I would maybe check in with the program coordinator. That's always better than hassling the program directors.
That sounds great, and I got some really nice pointers on that
Yeah.
as well. That's like a great point in name dropping specific faculty,
Yeah.
maybe faculty you've worked with or whose work you really
Mhm.
like, or there's
Yeah.
like a link somehow, and
Mhm.
personalizing that to that degree. That's great advice.
Yeah.
And the other question I perhaps had was, so I do know when you pass your step 3, that's like a good update to provide to programs and to reach out and just update them that I'm done with that. What are some other things that you've worked on during the interview season that is worth reaching out to programs and updating them on? Research projects, and like to what degree, what would you consider is, oh, I need to tell them about this? So for me personally, I was able to take step 3 before I applied. So I'm just thinking what that would be, which is like not doesn't sound too needy, but also is something that could pique their interest. Yeah.
I don't think there was, I mean, I didn't write my step 3 until I started residency. So there wasn't really anything specific that I did update programs on, but if you were, I would probably try and do it at the same time as also sending your letter of interest. You can just put it in the same email, like, oh, I also wanted to add in that I got another letter of recommendation and my application is now complete. I'm just writing out or reaching out saying, expressing my interest again, and I would love to interview for the program. And rather than just like sending multiple emails, because I think once you ask for what you're looking for, which is the opportunity to show them who you are in an interview, it doesn't serve much benefit to keep annoying them, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, guys.
Japji is one person I know I've worked very closely with, and she is super, super passionate about psych. So, Nisha, you can definitely keep her in mind.
I
Uh,
agree with that assessment.
Also, after, if we have a few minutes, I'd love to talk about APA and the resources. If anyone's interested in psychiatry specifically, there's definitely a lot of good opportunities through the American Psychiatry Association, but we can do that once we get through some questions.
hmm I think, Hetvi, you have another question, do you?
Yes. Okay, thank you. I do have very specific question. Actually, this might sound very basic, but since I just started preparing for my interviews and teamwork is like such a big highlight of who we are in general. But I wanted to know your perspective about how can we answer the questions like how do you handle a difficult patient, or how do you handle conflict with your teammate, or like questions like these where you don't want to come off as they were like very negative, but what could be a positive conflict? I was just brainstorming that, and I was wondering how could you present that positively. And with regards to the difficult patient, I was wondering whether we should highlight a difficult diagnosis, or or was it difficult to manage the patient, or was it the patient himself was very difficult to deal with? Like, yeah, basically these two questions.
I think great questions. I think the best way I can answer them is by sharing how I answered them, or things similar to that, because I think that seems to be more helpful. One thing that you do, I personally prefer having a very realistic answer instead of like a very Bollywood-esque I'm perfect answer, and everyone can see through it, right? We're kind of prepared to give all goody answers, which is not expected, but then you need to balance, like, you're not just also coming across as red flaggy. So I would always mention that I understand I've worked with so many people, and it's only natural. Not everyone works the same ways, and you people have different styles of working. But what I've also learned over the years is that very systematically approaching things and then addressing them and letting the other people share their opinion and making sure that at the end both of our interests are aligned towards patient care is what I usually target when I'm working with people that do not work in a very similar setting or XYZ. So that way you have accepted that I'm not best friends with everyone. I get that, and I don't expect it to be. But at least my goal is like the patient care should not be affected. And I think I have been in situations where we've had conflicting opinions and we've talked about it in an environment which is not in front of the patient or things like that. Another answer to the question, when I've had a difficult encounter with a patient or things like that, it does not necessarily need to be the most difficult diagnosis in the world. Don't make up things that haven't happened, because everyone's expecting you to be a student. If you've had like a very unique case, which is great. For example, my case presentation was on progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. As a neurologist, it is not as rare to me anymore, but it was decently rare to me as a student. I actually think that's the sweet spot. If there's a unique presentation of a common disease or things like that, I personally remember telling about, oh, when I was an intern, I was at this 3 a.m. shift and then was working on some stuff. And then I get paged about a patient who's coding at 3 a.m. And I kind of It was like my first time. It was kind of scary in the moment, but I knew what to do. So I went and I started CPRing this 90-year-old lady or 80-year-old lady, and I suddenly heard like a crack, and I freaked out in that moment. And in that moment, but I still kept doing what was needed to be done because I was aware what is expected. I'm probably giving chest compressions to a lady who is 70, 80-year old, has fragility, fractures, osteoporosis. It's okay if I broke a certain rib because I need to save this person, right? So this encounter, by this story, I'm giving you three or four things. I'm telling you how internship works in India, that I have done my clinical responsibilities. I've even woken up at 3 a.m. in the night without you even asking me that question. I've also told you that my medical knowledge at least is decent, that I knew that I have to give a CPR to a patient and it doesn't bother me if I've broken a rib because that's not the pertinent thing here. And thirdly, it is also something that is very believable. Like you will see coded patients very commonly on whatever rotation you're on, right? Coding patients. And how do you manage those patients? So this wasn't something like this person had an X-linked adrenoleukodystrophy because she didn't. And why were you treating the X-linked adrenoleukodystrophy as a medical student? You won't be offering too much, right? Unless like you have a situation there. So when they're asking you about a difficult patient encounter or a learning, focus it on like what you learned from that.
Mhm.
It's not a question about what is the most interesting case that you have seen, which I can also read. And as an attending, I probably have seen 10 times more interesting cases than you. Um, but yes, depending on what you're trying to get out of it. So whatever you have found to be an interesting story, think about that. Think
Mhm.
about, yes, the content is important, and then how are you going to present that? So I thought about this. I was ready to talk about it when I was going to be asked that question, right?
I
Uh,
think sense rather than just saying some interesting case where nothing about you is highlighted. Right. Understood. And I do have one last question. So is it okay to mention about a few residents or staff from the hospital that you talked to before the interview, in the interview?
um, I I mean, it's one of those things. It depends very situationally if you feel comfortable in that moment. I think there's no harm in mentioning if the interview is going really well. That I've also, having talked to a few residents from your program, I just felt that such a happy place to be in. And I've heard the same, and that just made me wanting to be more in the program. So that is a great
Mhm.
projection of why I want to be in your program, kind of a thing. I don't know necessarily if as a rule name dropping is necessarily fine. Because it depends like how different people take it. You at least want to be I'm sure if someone knows you and they've told like they're gonna put your name forward, and they have kind of done that in the background, right?
Okay.
uh you in the interview don't want to be perceived as you are less than anyone and then you're being referred, kind of a thing. But if it comes about naturally, they ask you about it, like, oh, this person mentioned about your name and they're really impressed of you, I'm like, then it's very, very natural and obvious. But you don't need to lean on someone else by your name. Let your interview do the talking, and obviously have them put in a name for you in the background.
Mhm.
If you're close enough to whoever you are talking about, right? Would be
For
uh,
sorry.
yeah. Nishan, do you have any thoughts on that?
On mentioning if you know people in the hospital. Yeah, I think I would say similar. I think it's an advantage personally because to me, if someone says, "Oh, I know someone that works here," it means you talk to them about what it's like working there, and they've had like good things to say, which made you convinced to stay there, and it shows that you have a good support system. So I think it would be an advantage if you're like, regardless of what position, if you're like, my friend's a nurse there or my friend's a social worker there, it means you have some sort of ties to the program. So I would say it's generally an advantage.
Thank you. Thank you for this insight. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Whatever XYZ questions we all might have, and if some of these don't get addressed, think of how you would take them if you were on the program director side of things. Think of them as regular people, because they are, and potentially a lot of you guys will be program directors or people in similar positions in the future? And how would you be as people? What would you really be okay with people mentioning, right? And be and we are all reasonable people. Everyone obviously operates differently. You're not here to make 100 out of 100 people happy. There has to be this balance of you being yourself. But yes, you got to think about what will at least be okay with 80% of the people, because you're trying to cast a wide net. Uh, right. But yes, because sometimes it's like it's very specific questions. Everyone operates differently. So I think what is helpful to me is like, what would I do if I were the program director? Just imagine doing that. E.g., oh, do we have you? Oh, I thought so. I wasn't just gonna like say out loud. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna say Ira because I wasn't sure. I think your microphone's muted. Until then, um, Amrita, did you have a question as well?
Hi, yes, I did. Hi, Avi. Yeah, my question was about confidence, about what's the right amount of confidence we have to project. Like, usually, someone might, like, the preparation is also a big part of it, but what's like a good balance between not seeming underconfident or overconfident? Thank you.
Nisha, do you want to address that first?
Sure. I think I answered a very similar question on in the chat just now. I think everyone's nervous. Honestly, interviews are nervous, but one thing that helps me is just realizing like if you're called up to the interview, it's because they checked your CV, they've filtered you already, and probably, done an enormous amount of filtering. So you deserve to be in that interview. And everyone there is just as smart as you and just as credentialed as you. And, you've had to study endless hours about all of these like flashcards. So you know your stuff, right? They know that you know your stuff. No one is here like in the interview questioning whether or not you know enough to be a doctor. That's not the question here at all. It's just, are you going to be a good fit in terms of your personality for our program? That is the only question that they're looking at. And, in terms of confidence, I think, sometimes preparation helps with confidence, knowing how to answer the questions to expect. And the first few are going to be a little bit more awkward, but once you've done a few, you'll get the hang of things. And practice with people if that's helpful. Ask, other friends or people going through the process, or even if they're not, to ask you questions and try and like sound natural doing it rather than just like practice rehearsed answers. And yeah, just, try and have it be conversational. And yeah, there's going to be a program out there for everyone, whether it's the program. Honestly, I did not think that Rutgers was where I wanted to go, but I loved it. I had a great time. So it might not be the program you think, but you'll find a program that works for you.
That is very true. I think a part of the confidence comes with the repetitions, because we're just not used to being in a system where there's a lot of interpersonal interviewing. It's mostly been, oh, you study too much, get a good score, you make it to the program, which I think is part of it here. But I think interviews are big, and they make sense. We're entering a profession where we're going to be talking to so many people. And having been a resident here, it just like I would weigh everything a lot more on the interview, right? Because how I'm talking to the patient is big here, how I'm talking to the colleagues is big here, how I'm communicating with everyone is really, really big here. So practice it. I think one thing that you all can also practice essentially is, if you feel you don't have people around to do that practicing with, with the YouTube sessions that I've made, I've done them as like question and like real time interviews. Do that, pause at the question, try answer that question for yourself, like how you would answer it, and then look at how Sahaj is answering that question in those YouTube videos. And then at the end of the video, and these are like all 10-minute videos, I have like, oh, what was I thinking as a program director, or how could I have addressed it differently? And those videos are actually made for people who do not feel comfortable talking to people or like finding people who can interview them. So you can do that to yourself. through those 3 interview sessions that are on YouTube. I think I'll share the link again as well. But back to Ira, is your microphone working?
Hi, Abhi. Happy belated birthday. Firstly, I hope you had a great one.
Thank
Am I audible?
us.
Okay,
You are.
perfect. Yeah, so I'm traveling. I wouldn't have otherwise turned on my video or asked the question, but I'm like, okay, there's no way that I don't turn my video on Abhi's webinars. So thank you so much for doing this. Thank you, Dr. Nishta, for your valuable time. And this is such an insightful session, honestly. Since we've had wonderful questions addressing red flags and everything, I just wanted to know if you guys had any red flaggy questions asked by the interviewers to you. Because that is something I kind of know will come up sometime. If not every program, I might experience something like this. So it's always good to be prepared from your experience, considering how you guys have had multiple interviews and have had great interactions. So I think that would really help the crowd a little bit if you could just talk about it. Thank you so much once again.
There's definitely, I think, I don't know if you guys are familiar with rules for ERAS interviews or GME rules. There's certain questions that programs and program directors are not allowed to ask you. Like they're not allowed to ask, for example, if you're up, like what other programs you're applying to or anything related to ranking, that's just against ERAS rules. They can't ask directly, like, where are you going to rank us? That's, they're not allowed to ask anything about your relationship status, and have discrimination based on that, because sometimes programs will try, because if they're like, oh, this person's like trying to have a kid, they're going to be on maternity leave, they're going to take time off like that. So sometimes I've heard that it can work against you to talk about it, but they're not allowed to discriminate against you. So if programs are asking things like that, if I think it's also generally considered like, yeah, not cool to ask any technical questions. That's why I think the program that asked me about CHF, I just ranked them last because I was like, no, I already did that on the steps. Other than that, other questions I've personally been asked, one of the questions that was unexpected was, it wasn't a red flag question, but it definitely caught me by surprise. A program asked, how did my parents feel about me being a psychiatrist? Which was something that I didn't expect. So that was a fun question. Yeah, have you any other interesting story?
Yeah. All right. First of all, thank you. The birthday was great, but I was working 24 now. So I
Oh no.
y-
Okay.
you guys are my birthday too today. So thank you for all showing up. See, I have so many people on my birthday. Importantly, I think, yes, I think to Nisha's standpoint, um, you don't want from your end, I think, as not asking a red flag question, I think the big one is also the visa question from my end right away, at least. And that is just as an example of that is your space to show interest and gauge interest from the program. That is your priority right away. That's a question that can be addressed later, right, towards the end of the session, and that is also not your priority in that moment. The other thing is, again, like Nishad previously mentioned, questions that are that you're not just making up for the sake of asking a question. Everyone's pretty decently smart enough and they can make out, are you making up a question for the sake of it, or is this something a genuine question? No one's gonna like overthink it if it's a genuine question, but don't clearly ask a question just for the sake of it, right? um don't be derogatory to a program. I'm sure no one will be, but just to be on the safer side, do not diss where you come from, do not diss what you have done, do not talk ill of other people in any way or form, because that is just reflecting if you are that person on one uh for one place of program, you are that person for wherever you will go ultimately as well, right? So it's more of a reflection of your character than anything else. So come across thinking of those things more importantly, and just, yeah, be yourself. I think, like, I know you, Ira, you just being yourself is a green flag, right? So
Thank you
some
so much.
yeah, just be yourselves, be happy people, ask genuine questions, and there will be genuine questions you have. For example, okay, how do I go about this thing in the area, or how does wellness work in your program? Or like, for example, I love designing quizzes. Do you think in your program there's space or time that would my skill of designing skills be helpful? And that kind of is a genuine question, one. And that kind of is also putting in a place, oh, this person's gonna be great for our program. For example, I'll tell you a very random thing that when I was applying for Emory, I was like, you know what? I realized I when I was in AMSA, I designed houses for all these 5,000 people in AMSA. And I would even mention, like, I named them as uh, Crimson Thunderjaws, Emerald Enfields, and things like that. And Emory has houses. That is so cool. I thought, like, because of that reason, I already want to come to Emory. That's such a specific niche thing. One tells you, like, you research our program so smart. It's not a thing that's gonna make a difference in the long term. A lot of places do not have houses. A lot of places have houses, but it's my thing, and your program has that thing. That's so cool. But you should bring it up, like things like that, right? And find whatever the reasons that you want to go to a program, bring those things up, even though they're like tiny things sometimes, but matter to you, right? It mattered to me. Like, you have houses. Oh, do you do activities regularly? Or if not, that's fine. Do you think there's place for me as a resident to like grow on it, or to help with this? Things like that would be
No,
my
absolutely. Absolutely. This was so insightful. Thank you so much for addressing my question. You guys are doing great. Thank you so much.
advice. Perfect. Before we go ahead, just a few things before, so that everyone's aware. What we'll do, three things that are left with, we can address a couple more questions. Then we have a feedback form just for everyone. Essentially, people who were with us during the last session. What Nisha, I was also trying to do was, I have in my feedback form a second part where we address like how USMLE or this journey has been stressful to you. How has that changed? uh, how your life has changed over the last year. Because hopefully we can use that data to kind of address, present as a research at some point. Like, can we just make this process a little less stressful for people because it's getting a little unhealthy? So if you guys like this session, I would love everyone to fill that feedback form. It'll take you a couple more minutes. And obviously, that feedback form has place for you to mention whatever you liked about this session or not. We tried to take your feedback from the last session, incorporate here. That's why we're opening it a lot more Q&A style to address your questions. But I also get it. A lot of you guys are interviewing for the first time. So we don't have a lot of questions. Like, I don't know what to ask, kind of a thing. So we're just sharing our things. Then we'll obviously take our signature group photo, and then Nisha has a uh, beautiful thing to talk about APA resources that I would love as many people to be able to attend that as well. Um,
Also just about conferences in general, because I think they do have a lot of value, but we can talk about that.
Absolutely. So any major questions before otherwise we can summarize the session and then move on to um end of
I think
session.
Sai has his hand raised if we want to take one last question.
Yes. Sai, do we have you?
Hello. Thank you so much, Avi. Thank you so much, Dr. Nisha, for this opportunity. Going slightly into more of a technical question. So this is a personal thing, kind of. So I'm currently staying in an Airbnb, and I might be moving to different Airbnbs during interview season. And I was wondering how big of a role your background plays in the 10 or 15-minute interaction you get with an individual.
Sure. I am a big fan of ring lights. I would highly recommend getting one. I think I got it for my residency interviews and also ended up using for my fellowship, regardless of the lighting. And I think it makes a big difference, just appears clean. You don't, some people like put in a lot of stuff into their background. Mine was a plain background wall. But I think as
Okay.
long as your lighting is good, as long as your connection is good and it's not super obnoxious. Like I was in an apartment in Brooklyn and our radiators are just loud. And I would just tell them, I'd be like, I'm in New York, there's fire engines, like this is what it is. And it's just like conversation. But I think as long as you appear clean and put together and prepared, like don't, show up late to the interview. just appear like you've been prepared, that you like did not just roll out of bed. It's fine. Can't go wrong.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And another quick follow-up question. So I know it really depends on the content that you have to talk about, but what do you think would be a good duration for an answer? Like how long should it go to at a max, and what's, crossing the limit?
I would say there's no rule book to that, but I also know it's very easy to sometimes feel like I haven't talked about it enough. Don't just stretch it beyond that it needs to. If you don't have content, you can shut up about it. And otherwise, you can also actually, it's very fair to redirect it to a point that might be more interesting to you, right? Obviously within the context of being relevant to what you have been asked. But again, to that point, once it stops being relevant, you stop. But be very adaptive. You're listening to the listener. You're seeing the listener, see their interest. Some people will give you this really happy face. They're really interested in your conversation. They want to listen more about it. Regardless, I would like to think nothing goes beyond a minute and a half. Uh, unless it is something that you're having a constant conversation about it. Give that opportunity to the listener as well, or to the speaker as well, because you have about 10 minutes, right? 8 to 10 minutes with one person, I would say. At least give that chance, at least one chance for them to ask a question, know you more. At least one chance that you get to ask them a question, and then everything is very adaptable based on how the flow of your conversation is with that person. I think if there's one takeaway for interviews, the big one in caps is adaptability. You can prepare, you can be very well prepared, but you need to be very adaptable. Every interview is very different, right? You need to like take into account how they're reacting to it. You need to be very like, okay, not let it's not going great affect that interview from bad to worse, because mostly it's going to be you perceiving it's not going great. Don't let that go downhill from there.
Also, a pro tip that I've gotten and would recommend to people is if you get asked a question, take 5 seconds before you start talking, even if it's just 5 seconds to gather your thoughts about what you're going to say. It's better than starting somewhere and then not sure where you're going and then end up somewhere else. So, 5 seconds, not that long, just to get your nerves in check, to know where to start, and then you can speak, and it's okay.
Lovely. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Shekhar has the next question. It is so crazy. Shekhar, Devika, Sai, who are all on the screen, were in Atlanta together. We were all together like within the last.
What a vibe. What a vibe.
Same time, yeah.
We are all
Hi,
cool.
thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for doing this. I have a very, let's say, comical question. But during these interview seasons, we are also like traveling around, attending conferences and all. And if I find someone who I interviewed with, and they belong to a particular program, the residents, how do you think I should, use that chance to the best of my abilities, and make them, not force them, try to make them put in a word for me, if at all that's possible.
Nisha, do you want to take that?
Sure, I can try. Yeah, that's definitely a really good place, I think, to meet people and to program directors, residents, fellows in all positions. Conferences are so, so great. I mean, of course, there's nothing you can do to make them like refer you. I think the best thing is just to create an impression. I don't think, there's anything else you can do beyond that. Just, ask questions about the program, get to know them, just, be personable and then, mention that, hey, I'm an applicant this year. I would love to interview. But, rather than, you can't really force them, but what you can do is make them feel like, hey, this is a fun person. I'd want to work with this person next year. I'd want them in my program. So I think that's all you can really do.
And there are no specific rules with regards to this, right? That we cannot reach out to any leadership
You
after we have
can
interviewed them.
you can reach out and you can follow up after if you get their contact info. A lot of times you can, reach out after saying, hey, we met at, APA, we met at this conference, and we remind them what you talked about, because people are meeting so many people at conferences. If you just said we met at this conference, like they might have no idea who you are. Remind them specifically what you talked about. Be like, oh, you stopped by in front of my poster about this, or you asked me this question and I thought it was a great question. So remind them specifically what your conversation was about.
Okay.
And then, say, I'm just following up, would love to chat more if you get a chance, or, I'd love a chance to interview. Let me know what I can do.
Thank you so much for that.
Only one point on that. Like some places will have this mention that do not contact us over emails and stuff. Just look into that because you want to be very sure you're not being perceived as going against the rules. And this is not a rule by ACGME or anything. This is sometimes specifically by the program because they're like, we're getting so many applications. We've just made a rule that we do not want to get emails and stuff. Uh, but having said that, if you end up building a personal connection with someone, and that personal connection does not need to be your uncle or an aunt, it can be a person you met at a conference who really likes you and you really like them, that is still a personal conversation that you can have, right? You can still let them know. It was like, and sometimes I think the best connections, and this is coming from me meeting a lot of people at conferences, both in the capacity of someone who's the junior to faculty and in the capacity of being a senior as a resident to a lot of applicants, is what works best for me is having spent time with someone and just feeling like it was so great to meet this person. This person has such a great energy. And then I don't even, if you reach out to me like, I would actually love to be in your program, or would love to interview with you. I don't see that as a red flag, right? You have to reach out. If at all, what I've heard during my time is like, I was like, okay, I'll reach out with my letters of intent later. They were like, or at least potentially they can say like, now we've done our interview screening, like I can't really help. So if you want to reach out in time. Um, I think is the other important. At least you won't have a regrets in that case. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, reach out early because interview slots fill up. So if you're wondering if you should send a letter of intent, do it soon, because slots fill up very quickly.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much.
Lovely. I just have a summary of things that we discussed, and we can wrap it up to the end of formalities after that too. So basically, a few important questions, common questions that you usually might be asked. Prepare them. Why USA? Why whatever your specialty is? Why medicine? Why neurology? Why psychiatry? I think these are basic expectations that you should be really good about. I think a very, very great question that kind of helps you prepare things is, tell me three things about yourself. Okay. That's a great question to practice because that has forced you. For example, like my three things were very specific. One of them was curiosity. Like I'm a very curious person in general. That pushes me to learn things, and I maintain to have that curiosity throughout life. And then what happens is, think about these questions like, if you're not asked them in a certain way, you will push them as an answer to another question. So that these are like high yield preparations that you can have. Another way that I like, when a lot of people ask me like, can you just do a practice interview with me? So I think there are a few questions I ask them. One of them is like, tell me three things that are not in your CV, right? That's again pushing you in a direction that is not expected, and I don't want you to be taken aback. So think about those things. Where do you see yourself in 10 years is another one. Obviously, talking about your hobbies. One challenging experience. Tell me about your internship in your international medical school. Tell me about your research experience. I think another really good question is, tell me one thing that you're really proud of. Again, it's one of those questions, even if I wasn't asked it, I will bring about it. Um, and then what questions do you have for us? So think about those questions, right? Electives, fellowships in the future from there on, extra tracks, wellness. Like Nisha mentioned, if you're planning to write a letter of intent and trust, do it now, sooner the better. The third bucket of things that you want to be very careful about is how you present yourself during the interview. Again, don't be late at all. Double alarms, triple alarms, whatever takes you to get going is okay. Importantly, enjoy this time overall. I think if you're happy around this time, you will be happy in your interviews. Not to say I know better than you guys, but like I'll tell you how I was. I decided to go to Mexico during this time. I gave a couple interviews from Mexico because I was happier that way, and then I would give my interviews happier that way. What I'm trying to get at is like whatever keeps you sane during this time. It's not necessary that you have to be in one space for 6 months and stress yourself out. And if that's making your interviews worse because now you're stressed out, right? So be happy. If that is something that keeps you sane, that is equally fine. But know how you work best. Um, and then know your CV and your personal statement by heart. Just go over uh those things. Mock interviews yourself, ask friends around, ask people who know the system, not your parents who have not gone through the system. uh or if you don't have people, go through the YouTube videos that I sent. Just practice it on yourself. And yes, just a reminder to keep helping people once you are on this side of things. Because it never takes away too much. I just feel we're all more energized that way. Great. So just a reminder to fill the feedback form yet again. Can I ask everyone to turn on their videos? We'll take a photo and then I'm gonna let Nisha take over for the APA session things as well. Okay, cool. Sai, Devika, Romil, Shilpa, Shekhar, Hitvi, Vedanshi, uh, EG, Shreya, cool. Tyagi, Japji. What's up? So nice. See everyone. Okay, cool. All right. Everyone smile. Perfect. Lovely. And Nisha,
Okay, I'm not gonna take too much time, but I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about conferences. If you guys don't know how or where to go or what to do there, or if you haven't been, almost every organization has one or every specialty. So highly advised trying to go to that conference, no matter what time of the year it is, even if it's right now or if it's after, even after match, just to make connections. It's never too early or a bad time to go. So always go to conferences. Everyone who is, or most people who are in an academic position will be at conferences, whether they're associate program directors, faculty, staff, residents, fellows. So it's a great place to meet people, a great place to present research. There's also a lot of cultural conferences. There's API, which I'm sure a lot of you guys may have heard about. There is subspecialty fellowships. There's AMA. There's all sorts of conferences, different regional ones. If you want to go to ones in Europe, if you want to go to ones in whatever part of the world. So always great, and a lot of them have initiatives, um, which is what I was. This is more specifically for the American Psychiatry Association. Hopefully, you guys can see this. I'm not gonna go through all of it, but there is the American, I can't even tell if I'm sharing my screen, but so the APA Foundation helps pay for a lot of residents and medical students to be able to go to conferences, helps pay for your registration, helps pay for hotel stay. So definitely look into their website, and they also have a lot of fellowships. Oh yeah, opportunities for residents and medical students. So they have a lot of travel funding. If you go to their website, I'll link the website in their chat. In different areas, you have to apply, and not a lot of people apply. So definitely consider applying to it. They have a lot of grants to continue research if you're working on specific things, up to $5,000. And there's a lot of people, up to like hundreds of students get funding to go to these conferences. So try and go. They talk a lot about education. Trying to find the deadline. It's up until December. So you have until December to put in an application. So I just wanted to mainly share that. Do you guys have any, or has anyone been to any conferences recently or had any experience with that? No. Do you guys know about the main API conference that happens in around May, June? No. Avi, do you want to talk a little bit about the OPI conference as well? Because I think that was one of my first conferences when I went as a medical student. As a third year med student, it was a great place to meet a lot of physicians in different specialties that are in pretty great positions. But I know Avi, you went most recently this year.
Yeah. So basically, I think what RP is helpful with, because this year I've been involved as the IMG chair, what we've been working on is actively finding physicians in positions who want to help IMGs. So it's a more dedicated space. It's less of you banging your heads into people, hoping they help you, and more of you collaborating with physicians who want to help you. You reaching out that I need help or like a way to like get clerkships or recommendations. So it's at least that part is aligned. You're both working in the direction of how can I help you? Right? Instead of like, I want help. Are you the one? Are you interested enough? Who can help me? So I think going to conferences such as that is helpful. In addition to whatever your specialty conferences are, because that's adding to your CV, that's adding to your PS, that's helping you meet people in that specialty. But you're still in this space where is this helpful? Are they going to reach out for me? Are they going to put in a word for me? And then it's still questionable. Places like API are people from who are themselves IMGs. They kind of know the challenges. They have their personal investment in helping you people, right? So I think there's a better chance at connecting with people who might want to really help you out. So I think a balance of both kinds of conferences is great, important. I unfortunately, as a medical student, could not make it to most conferences because I was in India and it was COVID, really bad COVID at the time. So it still works out, I guess, but it definitely increases your chances. If you're anyways gonna be here, I would say like combine it with a conference that's happening. Uh, uh, I get it. Like there's a lot of components that go in the thought process, finances coming again. So those are very reasonable thoughts. It's not like coming here just for an RP conference. That might not be everyone's cup of tea. That's fine. If you're anyways coming to the US, you have family, you plan to, then sure, why not? Right? But reaching out to people, places, making the most out of your trip, especially if you get invited to a program for a second look or something like that. I think that's a great combination of you wanting to make it to a conference, or maybe even asking people if their place offers a second look kind of a thing is also fine. I would say because sometimes like I loved your place, I loved having an interview at your place. Once you get that, uh fingers crossed, you can always reach out like I'm really interested and I was hoping would that be possible that I could come for a second look, because you know what that's creating is that you're interested in their program, right? So that's fair, and it's also gonna help make you that decision a little better. um but yeah, I think API has a conference or a symposium that's coming up as well. The symposium that's happening is online because that's helpful for like a lot of presentations that you guys might want to give, that might have not made it to journals or poster presentations yet. But we try keep doing something every quarter. At least there's a medical student symposium, then there's a national convention conference, which is for like everyone, API across the country. So this year, like we had like an award ceremony, which happens once a year as well. So that's the first time I went to the national convention. I honestly wasn't expecting it to be as big. So I was telling Nisha, like, this was my first time at a national convention. I only went because, like, I was nominated for the award and I was like, sure. And it was literally very big. It felt like IFA of American.
They're
Uh,
honestly really fun. That's where I met Avi, I think, for the year before. So you make a lot of friends in different specialties. And it's a good net, like there's not a lot of people that are physicians, right? It's a small group of people that are living a very similar life. So it's a good way to even build your social network.
Absolutely. I think.
Also, sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say, in addition to even attending conferences, a lot of organizations have leadership spots that are open. So you can always look for those too. They have like med student liaison positions or IMG representatives. Those are also really great things to add to your CV. And it doesn't, even if you're not just going to present research, look for opportunities to get involved in leadership positions as well.
The only one thing that I would say, if you're planning to like just come in with the expectation that you like that position and then work somewhat towards it, it's because honestly, if you don't, that might actually come across as a red flag, right? Because like we applied for it, and it's not hard. Like for example, like I when I was applying for like they were like, we would love to have you as any of these positions. I was like, I very passionately feel towards IMG, so I only want to apply for the IMG chair, if at all. Because I don't feel that I want to take out time from my life as a resident as a secretary position or a vice president position. Because I don't have the time, but as an IMG chair, I'm anyways doing that stuff. I think I can add value to it. So and as at your position, I think you guys have the time to pick up any of those positions. So whatever kind of interests you more, think about that. Um, yeah, I think that's mostly from my end. Nisha, any final thoughts from your end?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. I think the only thing we didn't talk about, so I'll quickly mention thank you letters after interviews. Send them. There's no harm unless a program specifically says we don't want thank you letters, send them. And again, be specific. Don't just say like thank you. Remind them, like similar to what I said about conferences, tell them something specific you talked about in the interview. Be like, oh, we talked about my research or we talked about this. Remind people because there's so much happening in the day. If you're gonna send something, make it specific. That's the only thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it was a lovely session. Thank you, Nisha, for uh, for extending.
No, of course. I'm on the West Coast, so my time is, different from you guys on the East Coast.
But thank you everyone for joining. It was always, as always, lovely to see all your faces. Just one final reminder, would love to hear how you feel about today's session in general. I think the tiny thing that you can help us all is by filling the feedback form. Let us know how you like these sessions. I think um, I am likely more than done for the year doing any more sessions. We'll come back next year. We'll try repost this recording, but I'm always available to all of you. And if I don't get back, you can publicly comment on posts so that I feel embarrassed that I haven't gotten back, so I can get back to all of you guys. And please take care. All the very best. Keep your sanity. Enjoy. And then you'll make it very soon. This place has enough spots for everyone who needs to be here. And once you're in the US, you guys are always invited to Atlanta, including Nisha.
Soon.
All right, guys. I think let's call it a night and day or afternoon or evening, depending on what part of the world you're in.
Thank you so much, Avi and Nishta. This was great. Thank you so much.
I think we have a pretty good attendance for this being 8 a.m. in India. A lot of you guys already know me, so I'm gonna pass the baton to Nisha. Nisha is actually the past IMG chair for RP as well, and then a million other accolades that I cannot fathom to enumerate here. But I think most importantly, Nisha is a great inspiration who continues to like give back and very passionate about everything that she does, including currently being a psych fellow in Seattle.
That was a very generous introduction. Thank you. PGY4 in Seattle. I'm doing my child and adolescent psych fellowship. I did my adult psychiatry residency training in New Jersey. Before that, I did med school in the Caribbean. So, I do have a lot of experience. Also, being a Canadian, I do have a lot of experience with being a non-US IMG. It's a tough, difficult road. It's annoying and there's like a lot of hurdles. So I get it. We can try and answer questions as best as we can. And I've been getting a lot of questions with interviews, so I figured this would be easy to answer everything in one place. And if there's something that we don't know, we'll definitely try our best to find people who might know the answer and get back to you guys. So, it's an open house. Feel free to ask questions.